Greetings and welcome back to Room 303, AP English and our Roberts lectures. We're on page 654. This is Robert Francis's Catch from 1950. Francis dates 1901 to 1987, a great American poet, lived in Amherst, Massachusetts most of his life. He was mentored by Robert Frost, so you want to put that in your notes. And in 1984, the Academy of American Poets awarded him with the prize for Distinguished Poetic Achievement. Not as often well known and yet brilliant poet, and we're going to look at one of his most famous offerings, Catch, a poem in which we're going to be working with the extended metaphor. So write that down in 2B. Extended metaphor. In what ways is the game that we play in 303 when we're reading poetry somewhat similar to a couple of children throwing a ball back and forth? Now I'm going to have you do at level 1 the reading, and of course we'll work summary, and then we'll jump to levels 2 and 3. I've got a reading that I found on YouTube that's really cool, and it involves as well the Eric Satie After the Rain music. So it's kind of a dual threat, if you will. I hope you'll enjoy this one. All right, just read along. Robert Francis Catch.
Two boys, uncoached, are tossing a poem together. Overhand, underhand, backhand, sleight of hand, every hand. Teasing with attitudes, latitudes, interludes, altitudes. High, make him fly off the ground for it. Low, make him stoop. Make him scoop it up. Make him as almost as possible miss it. Fast, let him sting from it. Now fool him slowly. Anything, everything tricky, risky, nonchalant. Anything under the sun to outwit the prosy. Over the tree and long sweet cadence then. Over his head, make him scramble to pick up the meaning. And now, like a posy, a pretty one plump in his hands.
All right, let's turn back now to the poem for just a second. Notice two boys, uncoached. It's an important word, I think, in the reading of this poem, are tossing a poem together. This notion that poetics, the exchange of poetry, is a game of a kind that can be shared in any number of different understandings of that word. Shared, tossed, created, scooped, all the verbs of this poem we'll pay attention to, obviously. Let's just put it in our notes at 3A. This is, of course, a reference back to the ancient bardic tradition. We think, of course, of our Iliad, the Odyssey, especially those two oral poems, as well as the poem, the epic poem Beowulf. We've given lectures, of course, about all of this on learnstrong.net. You can go back and look at that in more detail. But notice this exchanging, this giving, this back and forthing, if you will, right? Notice the repetition of sound, right? Just line 3, teasing with attitudes, latitudes, interludes, altitudes. Notice at line 5 the hyphenated Emily Dickinson-esque as almost as possible. Miss it. This notion that poetry should be something that you want to go for the ball, but it's going to challenge you in some way. It's going to sting your hand, it may be a little over your head, a little bit out of your grasp. You're going to have to, reach for it. And that's what great art does. It makes us, of course, reach for it. Notice all the prepositions: over the tree, over his head, and then again, make him scramble. The notion that there is a challenge. Line 8, notice anything under the sun to outwit the prosy. Now, this notion of anything under the sun immediately at 3a takes us to the book of Ecclesiastes in the Old Testament, the biblical tradition, right? That notion of everything that happens in normal life. Somehow art has this ability to transcend. Let's quickly go now to 2a. Major messages here. No question, playing with language is fun. It can be challenging, and that's what makes it useful. At 2b, there's any number of things you can write. Obviously, this is an extended metaphor that works very, very well. I will challenge you to think more about how this game plays out. Speaking of games at 3a, of all the titles that we mentioned, but put Stoppard's classic Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead, one of the classics of Room 303. We've given, of course, a lecture on this at learnstrong.net. The idea of playing on a tennis court, right, with words, the game called questions, right, statement to love and all of that. And then finally in 3b, what was a time that you played with language? Many philosophers, Wittgenstein comes to mind, as we've said many times, understood the value of language games. What was a time when you played with language and for you it was a wonderful experience, right? It was kind of fun and you enjoyed it, and maybe it involved somebody else as well. Well, there you go, Robert Francis's Catch. I hope maybe it invites you to go and read more of his amazing poetry. Thank you.